So we are standing here by the Baltic Sea in Stockholm with Dr. Nils-Axel Mörner. He is the retired head of the paleogeophysics department and geodynamics department at Stockholm University, and he was a sea level reviewer for the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change back in 2000. Dr. Mörner, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about this whole sea level issue. I just came from the COP24 in Poland, and over again we heard that our cities are going to be flooded. I'm from Miami. They say my city is going to be flooded. Are we all doomed from sea level change to start with?
Absolutely not. I mean, there is no big rapid sea level rise going on today, and there will not be. On the contrary, if anything happens, sea will go down a little. But also there is nothing which is called global sea level. It is different in different parts of the world. We have been seeing here, or will be seeing here, evidence that the absolute sea level rise component of the last 125 years in Stockholm, in the Kattegat, in the whole of the Baltic, in the Kattegat area, in the North Sea is 1.1 millimeter per year. Those who say that it was faster, it just doesn't work. Those who use satellite altimetry, which is 3.2 millimeter per year, there is something rotten with that type of analysis, because they have introduced correction factors, and those correction factors are again not correct. They are their own personal wishes. Okay, so if you correct it back to the beginning of the first 10 years, it's about 0.1 millimeter per year, not 3 millimeter per year, but 0.5. So that makes it better. That could be some sort of mean average. But I have been working a lot also in the equatorial regions, and comparing that with climate, we know. And everybody knows that it is something called little ice ages, and they were peaked. I mean, at the bottom, the cold period were in the 17th century, and in the early 19th century, and in the 18th century it was warm. When I go to the Maldives, to Goa in southern India, to Bangladesh, to Fiji and New Caledonia, I find something different. I find a high sea level during the Little Ice Age, and I get a low sea level, below present sea level, in the time of the warm period in the 18th century. So that is completely wrong. Something is wrong. Something is basically wrong. Either I have done it wrongly, but I have observational facts. I mean, I have peat below sea level in the Maldives, dated at the beginning of the 18th century to 1790. That's where it was flooded again. And I have a tsunami bed in the middle of the peat, and that is dated to 1733, and it's also historical documentation, so it cannot be wrong. Okay, so then and the same in Goa. I have a high sea level of 60 centimeter higher in the 17th century, and low sea level in the 18th century, and I have archaeological temple beneath. I mean, you cannot change it. And the archaeologists say, oh, it's about 1750. Okay? So it all makes perfect sense. But something is wrong. We need to understand that in physics and what it is. And that was something which I discovered in 1996. During the cold periods, Little Ice Age, it was solar minima. There was solar minima. So it is the sun which is affecting it. The Earth speeded up. And during the solar maxima, it decelerated. And these changes were good enough to spin the Earth so that when it was high spinning rate, little ice ages, more water was accumulated in the equatorial region. It's very simple, very physically completely correct, but you have to fix the data point, not saying that everything is similar globally. If you really decode it and are sure about the age determination and so on, then you see something new, and that is what's called rotational eustasy. And that has been the dominant factor in the last 500 years, and it will continue to be the dominant factor.
So it's, the UN says this has to do with our CO2 emissions. You're saying the sea level rise, whatever is going on, doesn't have to do with CO2?
No, that absolutely no. CO2, if it has an effect, it's minute. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. What has a big effect? It is the sun. Okay, we have a 60-year cycle in this data of present-day temperature. It's a rise from early 20th century to 2030, 2040, then a fall from 2040 to 2070, a rise from 1970 to 2000, and then the beginning of a fall. What is this? That is 30 years there. 2 times 30 is 60. That is a 60-year cycle. We see the same cycle in Earth rotation. Isn't that fantastic? And that's the thing. We see it in sea level changes, which is just discussed. And most important, we see it in the astronomical variables beating on the sun. Jupiter and Saturn has a 60-year beat on the sun. So how could it be CO2 then? And if CO2 is doing anything, they've coined it from the rise of temperature from 1970 to 2000. But from 1910 to 1940, we have an equally large and equally fast rise. If the other one could be cars and fossil fuels, the first one which could absolutely not have it. So it's something basically sick in the whole of the argumentation.
So what happened when you told the UN that they had problems in their report?
Yeah, they just ignored what I was saying. They simply say, because they cannot even discuss it. If they were clever, if they had facts on their hands, they could show that, no, you are wrong. But I can't, that's not the case. They just will not discuss it. I try to discuss it. I will try to show with their own data that they are wrong. Because in science we discuss. We don't forbid or neglect. That's very important.
And so we were talking earlier about you went to Chicago, to the Heartland Institute. So they tell us, and I heard this over and over again in Copenhagen, in Paris, in Poland, the science is settled. 97% of scientists agree. Do 97% of scientists agree with the IPCC in your experience?
No. Of course, that is something. This is also interesting you ask the question, because why do anybody say something when it's not correct? They say it because they have applied excellent lobbyists. They are working with lobbyists in their hand. Say this, do that. We don't do that. And they go, if you write an excellent paper in a journal, peer-reviewed, everything okay, but they don't like it. They write to the journal and say, no, you cannot write things like that. It's against the general consensus and so on. And they even put those journals on the blacklist. Okay. So this is a shabby thing they are going on. We don't work like in real science.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, I've heard that from other scientists too. It's incredible.
Galileo said for 400 years, no one should be scorned in physical debates just because he or she holds another opinion, which from the most popular one. Well, and we should learn that, but we haven't learned a thing in 400 years. We would still prosecute the Galileo. But in other means, no, there it was the solar things. Now it is the climate things, but it changes at first.
So as far as the climate debate goes, if you will, I'm sure you've noticed political developments in my country, in America. Our president said global warming is a hoax to help the communist Chinese. You have the new foreign minister in Brazil says it's a Marxist scam. In Sweden, it's very different, obviously. In Sweden, I think most people, maybe almost all people, agree. But what do you see in terms of the development of the debate? Is something changing, or good things happening, bad things happening?
It goes very slowly here. For two reasons, we in some way invented the CO2. First, of course, Arrhenius in 1896, when he said that more CO2 means warmer climate. Then a few years later, people demonstrated that he was wrong. But still it was dug up in the 70s, where Bert Bolin, he said, carbon dioxide has increased, temperature has increased, and he also claimed that sea level had increased. So made a story of it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it should have been like a university proposal, and it should have been discussed. But he happened to be the best friend with our Prime Minister, Olof Palme. They played tennis twice a week. They had gone in school together. And he became his advisor. And Palme wanted badly out of the dependence of oil, and also badly into the nuclear power. We had at that time 10 nuclear power stations. We have then 12, and now we have taken them down one by one. But he said, and this is a quotation in year 1973, if Palme says so, if we don't have at least 20 nuclear power stations by the year 1990, we will not survive as an industrial nation. That's of course wrong, but people thought of that. We should not make too much fun of it. It's wrong, but he thought of that, and that's okay, we can do that. But that meant that the CO2 came out as a fantastic thing, into nuclear power and out of the... So already in 1975, it was the governmental declaration, it was said that CO2 will probably be our greatest problem in the future. So, and then it went on, and strong people were... And of course, then all the international pressure joined up. I think the ultimate thing is that they want government from the whole globe. And that's a weird idea. I mean, this is a hope of controlling everything. It's an autocracy when it is really bad. No, nobody should rule like that. But everybody have had these strange dreams. Small countries begin larger, and imperias would want it to be super imperias, and then they collapse. Yeah. And we have the whole history full of that. So I don't think this globalism, that's a dangerous thing. But some of them, why are they working on? They're going against the developing country. And of course that is one of the only way of controlling China. But they're doing the opposite. Because China is now going into Africa. When they are not allowed to use coal for their development, like Nigeria. It's not allowed. They say we have endless amount of coal. Why couldn't we use it? Because if they use it, European Union withdraw their support economy. And then China comes in and says, dear friends, we are your friends. We will build it, and it will cost you nothing. And we will be run free of charge. We give it to you. But if you don't repay us in 10 years time, which you of course cannot do, then it goes back to us. Okay, so all these things, it's so many shabby things, and that goes also to this saying that 97% of the scientists are behind it. I mean, in physicists, I mean, I think it's 80–90% are against it. In geology, I feel 80% against it. Astronomy is the same thing. Oceanography is about 64 and 14 again, I would say. In meteorology, of course, because they are fighting for their own subject. There is, of course, 90s. In that case, it could be 97. But if they claim that they are 97 for it. I claim that it is 97% scientific facts against them. Okay.
What would you say to the United Nations? You know, they have this traveling circus every year. They meet and they have a COP and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. What should they be doing instead? Is there any real problems that maybe they should think about solving, or should they shut it down? What do you think?
No. You see, this is the terrible thing. This is the terrible thing, you know, because by putting all this emphasis on CO2, they can neglect all the real problems. The world is full of real problems. There are starvations, there are hungering, there are deaths, they are killing each other, they are doing a lot of things. But we can't discuss this. And all this overpopulation, which is discussed nowadays if it's real or not. But the movements into megacities. Megacities are terrible things for diseases, for feeding they need from outside, for natural disasters like earthquakes, volcanism and tsunamis. We have seen that, and we see it every day. The only thing we can do, we can have a warning system. And if we neglect them, it's terrible.
And if you could talk to the Trump administration, what would you tell them to do about this UN climate process?
Forget about it, okay. Because it's nonsense, and you have very carefully and cleverly understood that. So that's yes, but at the same time, one should do it with honesty and with sympathy for other people. One can even discuss it. It's very simple for us to discuss it because we really have the facts. They have the models, and facts are better than models. It is something really different. But that's the problem, because they begin with model in order to test the idea. But then they become so taken by the models, so they even discriminate by facts, right or wrong, because of a model. How could they do that? This is so unscientific, and that is a terrible thing. This unscientific part of it, because one day it will all be revealed as nonsense, and then we lose our trust. Trustworthiness, because science is so important. But of course, everybody wants to believe in something. And if they believe, I mean, all those people which don't know what they are talking about, but they believe that they are saving the world. But we don't save the world. Word keep on going, but we should not do bad things. We should take care of it, and we should do clever things. But if we focus just on one thing, and we focus on that, so that we could forget about the real things. And that's very, very bad. And as a matter of fact, this is the most dangerous and most frightening part of it. How all the people, how such a lobbyist group have been able to fool the whole world. I mean, we have seen it. We have seen it in Germany for political reason. It was inside the government. They did it cleverly, but it was clever. It was again lobbyists. They fooled the people. And we have in Russia, they fooled Stalin. Of course, it started with the communist idea and fooled it into the Stalinist communist. Also Mao, of course, chasing small birds and a lot of strange things. And that was this autocratic thing with it. And so lobbyism is so dangerous. And now when it has been able, because we have a new media world. It's a media world which can change the whole globe and affect it. Anyway, you have teenagers which goes out to the United Nations and give lectures and say, as being climate specialists. What do they know? They are very nice, but they should be out playing football or other things, not talking at the United Nations. That is an insult to science. It's an insult to real to be experts. But as the other side have increased all kind of strange people to be experts when they are not experts, the scientists say. What do scientists say? This is just a few guys which they have asked to say the correct thing. And if you go to places where they make reportage of that and that has happened. You can see that it's really, they have been paid to say the things which are being said. And that all this is frightening, that we are able to fiddle with reality. And that is frightening. That makes me speak, because this is the two things. Right must be right. The other thing that is frightening, we must work against it's not only it's frightening because it's wrong, and in that part I even see it as a little evil. So I work against it. Yeah.
So you expressed some confidence that the truth is eventually going to come out. You think the truth is going to win here?
So I gave a lecture in London a couple of years ago, and they said, "Oh, there's a lot of facts you have. Do you think they will change?" No, I don't. No, they will not change. The only thing, when their own measurements will show that it doesn't work, they change it, they correct it, as they say, and that is a terrible thing to do. They can correct if it's right, but they don't ever specify that they have to make a correction. You know, but if everything points to that we are going into a new so-called grand solar minima. And that is in the middle of this century. Maybe even already as early as in 2030, 2040, 2050. There's a lot of different calculations. And they are so different, have nothing to do with each other. All of them giving the same value. So when we are going into a new little ice age, maybe, but at least to the similar scope, it will change. Earth's rotation will speed up. The Gulf Stream will turn from being up into the Barents Sea, it will turn down into the Gibraltar area, and so on and so on. When this happened, then they will say, wow, okay? And what happened? The rats will leave the sinking ship. And they will try to escape without being, they should be ashamed, but they are not ashamed from society. That's a terrible thing. Welcome to Saltsjöbaden, a suburb to Stockholm. And this is a historical ground we are standing on, in the context of sea level changes and land uplift. As Sweden had 3 kilometers of ice on top of where we are standing at the ice age, it depressed Stockholm by 450 meters. And when the load decreased, then land started to rise. At the same time, at sea level of globally began to rise. This was at the beginning. The land was much faster rising than the sea, and people, and even today, sea level the land is uplifting by about half a meter per year in Stockholm. In northern Sweden by 1 meter. So even in a generation you can see that something changes at the coast. In order to measure this, in the 18th century, this mark was put in. This is cut into the rock 1704 by the architect Nicodemus Tessin, which built the Royal Palace in Stockholm, because he wanted to know what is going on. Is it land going up, or is sea going down? Or is it both? This point, now if we look at the water, this is the Baltic down there. And the mark here is 5.0 meter above the Baltic mean sea level. I have leveled it myself, but people have leveled it several times. And it is also into the survey network of Sweden, a bench here. This mark was cut 12 feet above the sea level at the time of the marking, I mean 1704. So somewhere 12 feet, that is 3.6 meter. 3.6 meter from 5.0 is 1.4. So 1.4 meter sea has withdrawn in 300 years. That makes 4.66 millimeter per year. And that is a figure almost identical to the figure which we get from the tide gauges of the last 200 years, of geological records of the last 3,000 years. There's an uplift, an absolute uplift of the rock of 4.9 millimeter per year. And this was almost identical. And it's a historical mark from 1704. That's quite remarkable. So, the tide gauge in Stockholm, which started to operate permanently 1774, it's the second longest tide gauge record of the world. The mean rate in the last 150 years is a lowering of 3.8 millimeter per year. That is the sea. And as this is going up, 4.9, the rock is going up 4.9, sea is withdrawing 3.8. The difference is 1.1 millimeter per year. And that is the rate, the absolute rate of sea level rise in the Stockholm area and the Baltic as a whole. And the same figure goes for the Kattegat Sea, the same figure goes for the North Sea. In the North Sea, we have the fantastic tide gauge of Amsterdam. Amsterdam and the whole of the Dutch coast is subsiding at a rate of 0.4 millimeter. The tide gauge says a rise of 1.5 millimeter per year. The difference is again 1.1 millimeter per year. That's the absolute eustatic sea level rise of the North Sea, of the Kattegat Sea, of the Baltic. And as a matter of fact, this is very good figure also for eastern US, because there they have been doing a lot of work, especially by a group of Dutch people, which are excellent sedimentologists. And not only did they get the present rise of about 1.1 millimeter per year, they also got a fantastic figure that 1,000 years ago, when we had a warm period here in Northern Europe and we had higher sea level, they also had a high sea level. The rate of the rise there and the amplitude and the rate was even larger than it is today. And there were no cars, not more cows, luckily more Indians, a lot of buffaloes, of course. So that's the difference. That's how you trace the absolute sea level in this area of the world. If you go to the equatorial area, where I have been working very much in the Maldives, in southern India, in Bangladesh, in the Fiji Islands, and last November in New Caledonia. It's something completely different.